They thought Earth would kneel. The message came in the form of light, flickering in orbit, translated by Aegis 1, the only defense satellite still functioning since the solar storms wiped half our grid last winter. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. Comply or be eliminated. The Galactic Council's voice wasn't even a voice, just a monotone pulse fed through translation code. No emotion, no explanation, just a broadcast to every government still clinging to power. I remember sitting in the war room of what used to be the Pentagon. It was more bunker than office now. Cracks ran along the ceiling. Generators hummed beneath the floor. The president hadn't shown his face in 2 weeks. Some said he fled to the Andes. Others said he was dead. I didn't care. Command fell to whoever was left with enough firepower to make noise. And for now, that was us. Task Force Reaper. My name's Grant. Colonel Thomas Grant. 3rd generation Marine. 1st generation to fight aliens. "They're not bluffing," said Commander Irons, slamming the tablet onto the table. "They wiped out Deneb 3 in under 6 minutes. Population, 2 million, gone. No survivors." I didn't flinch. Not because I wasn't scared, but because fear doesn't help when you're the last card in the deck. "They gave us 72 hours to submit," Irons added, "or they'll do the same to Earth." "Then we don't give them 72 hours, I said. The room went quiet. The brass stared like I'd grown 2 heads, but I wasn't speaking out of madness. I was speaking from truth. We'd been preparing for this ever since Mars fell. They underestimated us after the First War, assumed Earth was fractured, that we couldn't organize, and they were half right. The UN collapsed. NATO's a memory. But out of the ashes came something meaner, leaner. No committees, no debates, just survival. "We strike first," I said, "before they get comfortable." A voice spoke from the corner. "With what? Rocks and duct tape?" That was Leach, our engineer, a drunk bastard with a mouth and a brain that kept him alive in places that would kill most men. "With everything we've got," I said. "Project Helix." Eyes widened. "You're insane," Irons muttered. "It's untested. Better than unarmed." There was silence again, the kind that feels like the air's been sucked out of the room. Project Helix was the final contingency plan, a deep black weapons protocol, illegal under every treaty ever signed. But treaties meant nothing to the Council. Irons finally nodded. "Then God help us all." "We launched the first strike at 0400 hours. Not missiles, not drones, a virus. Not the kind that kills flesh, but the kind that kills minds. Artificial intelligence scrambling malware, built from fragmented alien code, designed to collapse neural grids, shut down propulsion, blind their ships mid-flight. It wouldn't destroy them, but it would cripple them. The plan was simple. Hijack a dead freighter, rig it with Helix, send it to the edge of Council-controlled space. They'd open it, they'd scan it, and the second they did, their ships would forget how to fly. Reaper unit went dark after launch. No communications, no signals, just silence. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Then we got the first message, a garbled signal from one of their long-range patrols. Static. Screaming. Then, help. Ship. Falling. Systems. And then nothing. It worked. They felt our bite. But we knew retaliation would come fast and it wouldn't be clean. They sent a fleet, not a warning squad, not diplomacy, a full invasion line. 17 capital ships, over 2,000 fighters, battle platforms large enough to eclipse cities. We stood on the edge of Earth's last dawn. I looked up at the sky that night, wondering if the stars would be red by morning. The skies broke before the cities did. We picked them up over the Indian Ocean. council warships the size of floating continents, shimmering with ion shields and layered armor that laughed at human weaponry. They didn't hide. They wanted the world to see them coming, to feel small, weak, helpless. It worked on most. Riots exploded in Jakarta. New Delhi's comms went silent. Parts of London collapsed under civil chaos before a single alien even landed. People weren't waiting to die. They were doing it early, as if to rob the invaders of the satisfaction. But we didn't have time for fear in the bunker. "They'll hit major population zones first," Leach muttered, eyes glued to the holographic projection of Earth. "Standard alien domination psychology. Hit the soft belly, show superiority, make us beg." I kept my eyes on the central node of the display. The capital ships were aligning. 3 over Asia, 2 over Africa. The rest spread like a net over the Pacific. They weren't just invading. They were quarantining Earth from orbit. "Any word from Reaper Unit?" I asked. Irons shook his head. "Still dark. They might have fried themselves in the Helix blast wave." I didn't believe that. Reaper Unit didn't die quietly. "What's our play?" Irons asked. I looked around the room. Not a single politician left. Just soldiers, engineers, 1 or 2 broken scientists, too old to run. "Same as before," I said. "We punch first." The first real engagement happened off the coast of what used to be Madagascar. Council dropships entered the atmosphere. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They looked like silver comets, glowing with power, no exhaust trails, no wings. Pure anti-gravity propulsion. They didn't even make sound. But our rail batteries did. We'd hidden them inside the shell of an abandoned offshore oil rig, coated in reflective paint to avoid detection. The second one of their dropships came into range. We let it rip. The shell tore through the air like the wrath of God, cracked the sound barrier in half, and slammed into the alien craft with enough force to shake the ocean floor. We watched on satellite as the council vessel jerked mid-air, spiraled, and exploded in a burst of black plasma. Cheers erupted in the bunker. Grown men who hadn't smiled in months suddenly looked like boys again. Even Leach lit a cigarette, eyes wide. "They're not invincible," he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. I didn't join the celebration, because 10 seconds later, 10 more dropships appeared, and this time, they fired back. Our rail rig vanished in a white flash, atomized before the impact ever reached the sound delay. They were fast learners. By day 2, Earth was bleeding. New York was gone. Not leveled. Gone. A massive beam weapon from orbit, pinpointed to the nanosecond, erased the skyline in a single stroke. 8 million people turned to dust. No warning. No evacuation. Just silence. We monitored a feed from a drone that barely escaped the blast radius. The ground was molten. The Atlantic boiled. But what hit harder than the destruction was the message they sent after. A broadcast. Not just through our satellites, but hijacking every screen, every device, every smart lens, every terminal, even inside our own bunker. A face appeared, not human, not even close. It had no eyes, just sockets that pulsed with blue light, skin like obsidian glass, smooth and cracking at the edges. Its mouth didn't move. The voice came from somewhere else, deep and vibrating like a subwoofer embedded in your spine. "You have failed to comply. This is mercy. Next will be extinction." The feed cut. The room fell into a graveyard. Hush. Then Leach muttered, "Mercy? These bastards think vaporizing 8 million people is mercy?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't thinking about their message. I was thinking about ours. We needed to hit back, not just a skirmish, not a warning, a wound, something deep, something they'd remember. That's when we decided to go for their orbitals. They had a command vessel stationed above the Amazon, a council supercarrier named Zurak Tel, roughly the size of Rhode Island, floating above Earth like some ancient god come to claim its domain. It controlled most of their short-range drones and atmospheric navigation grids. It was protected by 4 frigates and at least 100 interceptors. Touching it was suicide. So we didn't touch it. We crashed into it. We took an old orbital junk hauler, one of those cargo vessels NASA gave up on after the funding collapsed, stuffed it with a fusion bomb salvaged from a decommissioned Soviet silo, wrapped the shell in helix code laced into the nav system, and launched it straight up on a stolen Chinese magnetic rail pipe. They detected it. They tried to scramble fighters. Too late. The explosion didn't destroy Zurak Tel, but it gutted its underside and tore a hole in its reactor bay the size of a football field. We watched as it began to fall. Not explode. Fall. The Council didn't know how to crash. Their ships were built to hover, not collide. The mighty Zurak Tel spiraled like a dying god, hit the Amazon canopy like a meteor, and vanished beneath the green with a shockwave that rattled half the continent. 500,000 trees died in that blast. But so did something better. Fear. Day 3 was different. The Council paused. They didn't attack immediately. They recalibrated. Their patrols slowed. Their formations shifted. It was the first time they looked cautious. We'd wounded them. And in doing so, we gave Earth something it hadn't had since the start. Hope. Irons came to me with new intel. We intercepted some council chatter, he said, tossing a data slate on the table. Translated it through a repurposed linguistics AI from NASA. Took hours. What are they saying? He smirked. They're confused. They thought we were a low-tier species, war monkeys with nukes. Now they're not sure what the hell we are? I read through the logs. One line stuck out. Their defiance is illogical. Their resistance, emotional. I grinned. Damn right it was. But it wasn't all victory. That night, Reaper Unit's signal flared up, briefly. A distress ping from the dark side of the moon, only one word attached to it. Betrayal. My gut sank. Reaper Unit was ambushed. By humans. A splinter faction. Ex-military. Ex-intelligence. High-ranking cowards who made a deal with the Council for survival. They were promised safe zones, resources, shelter. All they had to do was sabotage Earth's defenses from the inside. They killed Reaper Unit, slit our throat from behind, and in return, they got spared. For now. I stared at the images. Burned corpses in hard suits, shredded equipment, signal jammers built from our own tech. Leech paced behind me, fists clenched. We've got traitors in the blood. What the hell do we do now? I didn't speak for a long time. Then I turned. We burned them. We launched Operation Judas before dawn. Tracked the signatures of the traitor base, an old aerospace station in the Rockies. Still had power. Council tech, too. Shields, transport relays, even gravity wells. Didn't matter. We sent in Ghost Squad, our remaining Black Ops unit, the ones who lived for close-quarter hell. We gave them silencers, EMP rounds, and a single directive. No prisoners. It was over in 27 minutes. The last traitor begged, on his knees, said he only wanted to protect his family. We found out later he never had one. Leech pulled the trigger himself. By day 4, Earth was no longer the victim. We weren't just surviving. We were fighting. And for the first time since the Council arrived, they looked unsure. Their orbitals pulled back. The bombing stopped. Some of their scout ships even retreated. But I knew better. They weren't quitting. They were preparing for something worse. Because on the edge of our long-range radar, a new blip appeared. Massive. Unlike any ship we'd ever seen. Not a battleship. Not a carrier. A forger. Alien legend had talked about them. Planet crackers. Tools of total extermination. If diplomacy failed, if compliance never came, the Council sent one message to the universe. No species defies us. They called it Vorthkai, and it was headed straight for Earth. It moved like a shadow across the stars. The Vorthkai wasn't just a ship. It was a declaration. The Galactic Council had exhausted their patience, and now they were ready to end the problem. End us. We'd crippled their supercarrier, humiliated their assault lines, and destroyed their puppet faction on Earth. And they answered the only way tyrants know how. With overkill. We picked it up as a gravity anomaly first. Our satellites screamed as their sensors failed to make sense of it. Mass readings off the charts. Electromagnetic fields surging like solar flares, pulling space debris into orbit like a black hole with discipline. Irons stood over the holomap, jaw clenched. How big is it? Estimate says 12 kilometers long, Leach answered, lighting another cigarette with a shaky hand. Armor laced with neutronium. Its wake is distorting the moon's gravitational pull. I stared at the readings. It wasn't just a ship. It was a floating execution platform. It didn't fire weapons like a standard vessel. It didn't need to. It created artificial singularities, miniature black holes. If that thing got within range of Earth's atmosphere, it wouldn't bomb us. It'd fold the crust like paper and rip the core into space. They're not leaving survivors this time, Irons muttered. No, I said quietly. They're sending a message to every other species watching from the sidelines. Earth resisted and died screaming. There was silence in the command bunker. Even the generators sounded like whispers now. Hope had walked out the door. That's when I made the decision. We go up there. Irons blinked. You want to board the Vorthkai? Not board it. Kill it. He laughed. One of those hollow, nervous laughs men make when they're standing next to the edge and someone suggests jumping. You want to kill a ship the size of Manhattan? With what? A slingshot? With the truth. We didn't have firepower. Not enough to punch through a forger's shielding anyway. But power wasn't our advantage. It never had been. Our advantage was desperation. The kind of mad, teeth-gritted insanity only humans were capable of when the knife touched bone. So I did what desperate men do. I called a ghost, Dr. Riven. Not a friend, not a soldier. A man buried by history. Once called the father of theoretical warfare, before he was locked away in a mountain bunker for building a weapon so unstable it was outlawed before it ever fired. They said his ideas were monstrous. I needed a monster. We pulled him out of Cold Cell 9, under Facility K, guarded by automated turrets and a kill switch wired to his spine. He didn't look surprised. Figured you'd come, he said, blinking against the sunlight for the first time in years. I heard the Council showed up. I heard Earth grew a spine. Can you stop a forger? I asked him directly. He smiled. I can erase one. Project Necra. His final design. A weapon not made of bullets or bombs, but of time. Riven had developed a temporal spike, a spear of chronal instability launched into a target's mass field. It wouldn't explode in the traditional sense. It would rewind a specific object's atomic structure back to a point of non-existence. In short, we could delete the Vorthkai from history itself. Problem was, it had never been tested. The device burned out every simulation, fried circuits, melted batteries, and it required a pilot. A suicide mission. Send a drone, Irons argued. Riven shook his head. The navigation AI can't calculate distortion variance in real time. Organic brain required. I looked across the room. And I knew what I had to do. I didn't tell the others I was going. They would have tried to stop me. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about sending a message louder than anything the Council had ever shouted. We're not just survivors. We're defiant. I climbed into the retrofitted Deep Space Interceptor, callsign Black Fang, with the Necra device mounted in the belly. The cockpit was barely bigger than a coffin. The controls were alien to me, redesigned to withstand the temporal field exposure. As I sealed the hatch, Leach appeared at the launch bay, holding a comm headset. You die, I'm going to have to tell the kids bedtime stories where you get eaten by the aliens, he grinned. I smirked. Tell them I bit first? The thrusters lit, the walls rumbled. I lifted off. The climb was rough. Earth's gravity fought like hell. The Vorthkai shimmered in the distance, a monolith of dread, slowly moving into optimal firing position over Asia. Cities lay beneath it. Seoul, Beijing, Bangkok. Millions of lives, waiting to vanish. As I neared orbit, the comm crackled. Rant, do you copy? It was Irons. Copy. You don't have to do this. Riven has a prototype, autonomous. We can still... Too late. I cut the line, because I knew what had to be done. No computer could replicate the kind of instinct this needed. The Necra field was unstable. Every second, the ship vibrated like it wanted to peel apart. Panels hissed. The readings spiked. One miscalculation, and I'd implode before I even got close. But the Vorthkai loomed ahead, massive and slow, overconfident, like every tyrant. I angled the ship toward its underbelly, locked the spike. The screen flashed warnings I couldn't read anymore. Time was bending inside the cockpit. I could see my own fingers twice, one forward, one back. Then the Necra launched. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, reality split. I don't mean that poetically, I mean literally. The Forger ship's core fractured in time. The center of its hull rippled, then vanished in chunks, disappearing like someone had cut pieces out of a film reel. Sections of its engines blinked out of existence. The entire command structure aged backward. You could see it. Metal unforming, circuits melting into ore, alien alloys returning to dust. Then the explosion came. It wasn't fire. It was absence. A vacuum burst of space collapsing on itself, swallowing half the Forger and tearing the rest apart like tissue. And just like that, the god died. They say I blacked out. They say my escape pod burned up on re-entry, that I shouldn't have survived. But I did. 3 days later, they found me in the ocean off Japan, half dead, spine cracked, skin blistered, but breathing. And when I opened my eyes in the recovery bay, I heard the news. The Council was gone, retreated. Silent, no more broadcasts, no more threats, just a sky that was finally quiet. But the war didn't end there, because something worse had begun. In the aftermath, survivors crawled from bunkers, nations reformed, power vacuums yawned open, and humans, being what they are, began to fight over the ashes. Some said we should build more Necra devices. Others said we should sue for peace, rejoin galactic diplomacy. But a few, a dangerous few, said something else. They said, "We won. Now we take what's ours." And just like that, humanity wasn't the underdog anymore. We were the apex predator, and predators don't ask for permission. Victory always tastes different than you expect. No cheering crowds, no flags, no parades, just a numb silence. The kind that settles when the screaming finally stops and you realize what you've lost. I lay in that recovery bay for 10 days before they let me walk again. My legs still ached. I could feel something rattling in my chest when I breathed too deep. Radiation, maybe. No one could tell. Our medical labs were just as broken as everything else. But I wasn't thinking about dying. I was thinking about what came next. The Vorth Kai was gone. The Council's fleet pulled back, and our satellites showed a clean sky for the first time in weeks. Earth should have been celebrating. It wasn't. By day 10, after the fall, reports started rolling in. Civil unrest in Siberia, militia groups rising in South America, old rivalries flaring back up in the Middle East. And the worst? China and what was left of the EU were locking horns over the alien tech recovered from the crash zones. They were fighting over scraps. We had stared extinction in the face and spat in its eye, and now we were back to arguing over dirt like dogs. Irons met me on the southern wall of the bunker that morning. He didn't salute. Neither of us stood on ceremony anymore. "They're carving up the planet," he said flatly. I didn't ask who they were. I already knew. "The tech from Zurak-Tel was split 5 ways," he continued. "Black site labs popped up overnight. Everyone wants to reverse engineer Council shielding, weapons, propulsion. It's a gold rush." "Who's in charge of all this?" I asked. Irons looked away. "No one." There it was. We had no government, no structure, just fragments. Pockets of survivors and warlords clinging to power. Scientists chasing the promise of supremacy. And behind them all, the vultures. The ones who sat out the war but emerged afterward with money, influence, and clean hands. The kind of men who wait for blood to dry before buying the battlefield. I leaned on the railing, watching the ruined skyline. Cities half buried in ash. Skyscrapers with gaping wounds where plasma blasts had kissed their bones. "I didn't burn in the sky so some CEO could stick a flag in alien metal and call it his property," I muttered. Irons nodded. "You're not the only one." That night, I was approached by someone unexpected. A kid, barely 20, wearing scavenged armor and an old Marine patch he probably inherited. He had one of those 1,000-yard stares people only get after watching friends die. "Your grant?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a data shard. "No name, no credits. Just said it's from someone who wants you to know what's happening at Site 9. Then he walked away. I popped the shard into a secure terminal. The footage was grainy, corrupted at the edges, but the sound was clear. It showed a lab. Alien wreckage laid out on cold steel tables, human scientists standing over it, and a man in a black uniform giving orders. He wasn't military. He wasn't civilian either. He was something new. "We're done being at the mercy of others," the man said. "Earth is the cradle of humanity, but cradles are for infants. We are gods now." Then came the part that made my stomach turn. The footage cut to a test chamber. Inside, an alien. Not Council. Something else. Smaller. Blue-skinned. Shackled to the wall like an animal. Still breathing. Then, screaming. Electricity. Blades. Interrogation. I watched 20 minutes of torture before I had to shut it off. Not for their sake, for mine. Because I knew what I was looking at. The birth of something worse than the Council. They called themselves the Ascendant Path. A splinter organization formed in the shadows during the invasion, comprised of defectors, ex-corporate elite, rogue scientists, and Black Ops units too dirty to be publicly acknowledged. Their goal wasn't defense. It wasn't survival. It was domination. They believed the war proved one thing. Humanity didn't need to join the galaxy. It needed to rule it. And they were willing to do whatever it took to make that happen, including dissecting living aliens to learn how to weaponize evolution. "We beat gods," their manifesto said. "Now we become them." I sat in the dark for hours after reading that, alone, listening to the hum of the reactor below my feet and wondering if we'd made a mistake. Maybe Earth was supposed to burn. I called a meeting of the remaining task force leaders. We gathered in the lowest level of the bunker, the one still protected by old-world encryption. No signals, in or out. No leaks. Irons. Leech. Commander Knox from the Arctic Circle Defense Grid, Lieutenant Varda from the Pan-African War Front. Survivors. Real ones. "We're not done fighting," I said, standing in front of the hollow table. "We've just changed enemies." They didn't look surprised. Knox grunted. "Knew someone would try to flip this. Always vultures after war, always opportunists." "No," I said. "These aren't opportunists. They're fanatics." I showed them the footage. The labs, the torture, the weapons being built using reverse-engineered council tech, disintegration beams, neural scramblers, gravity knives. Some of the designs were half-human, half-alien, hybrid monstrosities with synthetic skin and exo-bone armor. "You think the council was bad?" I said. "Wait until it's us." Leech leaned back, face pale. "They're building an empire out of corpses." "Then we burn the empire," Varda said coldly. And in that moment, the resistance was born again. Not against aliens. Against us. Our first target was a transport vessel, registered as Salvage Crew 11, but carrying more than wreckage. The intel said it was ferrying a half-developed prototype weapon from Site 9 to a fortified black lab in Greenland. We intercepted it over the Arctic. 4 men. 1 hacked satellite cannon. No backup. We turned that ship into falling ash. Inside, we found proof. Tech fused with human DNA strands, remote control implants for soldiers, a database of names, traitors, scientists, supporters of the Ascendant Path. Some were old friends. Some were people I'd once trusted. The lines were drawn. This wasn't a second war. This was a cleansing. They hit back within days. An explosion in Bunker A12, Iron's secondary command base. 50 dead. The rest, missing. They left a message behind, carved into the concrete with a plasma torch. "There will be no peace for cowards." That's when we stopped calling it civil war. This was a purge. And they wanted to start with us. We weren't fighting for Earth anymore. We were fighting for what came after Earth. The Ascendant Path didn't want peace. They wanted dominion. Their creed spread faster than their weapons. Propaganda networks that survived the Council War started echoing the Path's message. Videos spliced with images of destruction, overlaid with twisted truth. "We survived the stars. Now we must conquer them. Do not fall back into weakness. Rise, ascend." It sounded noble, empowering even, especially to those who'd lost everything in the invasion. But underneath the slogans were laboratories filled with corpses, re-education camps disguised as relief shelters, genetic tampering that turned men into monsters, engineered for obedience, not thought. They weren't just building soldiers, they were designing them. I watched one of the videos intercepted by Varda's team. A man, human in frame, maybe 30, covered in scars, stood in front of a camera. Behind him, a dozen others, silent, unmoving. He spoke in clipped, perfect tone, memorized. I was born weak, but they gave me purpose. They took my pain and replaced it with strength. I have no name now. I am function. I am future. Then he stepped aside, and a child, barely 12, walked forward, wired, collared, empty-eyed. "This is my replacement," he said. The screen went black. I didn't sleep much anymore. My mind replayed things in loops. Alien battles, cratered cities, the Vorth Kai exploding like a ruptured star. But lately, it was the faces that kept me awake. Not the dead, the living. Men and women who should have known better, who looked the future in the eye and saw control instead of unity. Iron's funeral was small. We didn't find his body, just a fragment of his tag, fused to charred metal. He'd been caught in the sabotage at Bunker A12. His name was the first we etched into the Resistance's wall. There'd be more. Leach, now our acting intel chief, stood beside me in the ruins of that same bunker a week later. He was quiet. A man like that always had something to say. If he wasn't talking, it meant something was wrong. "What is it?" I asked. He handed me a datapad. "You're not going to like this?" I scrolled. Photos, thermal scans, blueprints. It was a spaceport, hidden beneath the Andes, buried under what used to be an ancient mining operation. Refitted, reinforced, alive with activity. Not trade, not evacuation, construction, ships, armored, armed, branded with a new emblem, a twisted double helix wrapped in fire. "Looks like they're not waiting to claim the stars," Leach muttered. "They're building a fleet," I said. He nodded. "One-way vessels, from what we can tell. Sleeper stasis, long-range capability, enough firepower to scare anyone on the other end." "Colonization?" I asked. Leach shook his head. "Conquest. We launched a recon op 2 nights later. No drones. The Path scrambled those too easily. We went in old school. Stealth suits, blacked-out sky jumper, radar jammed. Varda led the team. 5 went in. 3 came out. They'd made it deep inside. The Path wasn't just building ships. They were growing crews, rows of cloned bodies suspended in tanks, each tagged with numbers, each enhanced with synthetic muscles and micro-injected AI mapping. Autonomous obedience. When the soldiers woke, they'd already be programmed. No fear, no hesitation, no past, just the mission. And the worst part? They weren't all human. Some had hybridized tissue, alien muscle grafted with human bone, council DNA woven into their neural cores, biotech we didn't even begin to understand. The Path wasn't just trying to lead humanity, they were trying to replace it. We called it what it was now, the Second Human War. But this time, it wasn't about fighting off extinction. It was about defining humanity. The resistance grew. Slowly. Carefully. Former soldiers. Scientists who still had a conscience. Survivors who remembered what it felt like to lose their homes, their families, and refused to trade their scars for lies. We hit supply chains. Sabotaged fusion core shipments. Took out a cloning facility in northern Africa with a targeted EMP burst that fried every vat in seconds. And with every blow, the Path struck back harder. They didn't play fair. Whole villages disappeared. People abducted, reassigned, or worse, genetically erased. Their message was spreading like wildfire now, especially in the broken zones, regions untouched by the Council but devastated by the aftermath. Places where food was scarce, order non-existent, and bitterness grew like mold in the dark. To them, the Path didn't look like monsters. They looked like hope. That was the worst part. They'd learned from the Council's mistakes. They came with offers, not threats, food, shelter, unity, strength. Join and live, refuse and vanish. Leach brought a new worry to my desk a week later. "Council signal," he said, sliding the waveform across my screen. "Encrypted, fragmented, but real." My chest tightened. "Where?" "Outer orbit. Something just pinged back, not a ship. Not exactly. It's like a probe, but it's not moving." He zoomed in. There it was, hidden behind space debris, masked by a synthetic asteroid field, the size of a cargo container. No visible weaponry. But the signal it emitted. It wasn't random. It was a warning. "Observation complete. Species deviation detected. Reassessment pending." I stared at the words for a long time. "They're watching," I said quietly. "Yeah," Leach nodded. "And I don't think they like what we've become." It hit me then. The Council didn't retreat in defeat. They'd retreated to wait, to see if we'd destroy ourselves. Or worse, become something they'd have to destroy again. They didn't fear our weapons, they feared our potential. And looking at what the Ascendant Path was building, I couldn't even blame them. This wasn't evolution, it was corruption. The Resistance's numbers were growing, but time wasn't on our side. The Path's fleet was almost complete. We had intelligence on at least 4 launch-capable vessels, each one loaded with hybrid crews, experimental weapons, and no known fail-safe. They weren't exploring space. They were setting out to subjugate it. And if they succeeded, we'd become the thing we once swore to fight. A galactic plague. I stood before the Resistance Council that night. Tired men, angry women, fighters, survivors, every single one with something to lose. They're going to launch within the week, I told them, and once they're out there, we won't be able to stop them. We could intercept in orbit, Varda said. Blast the launch tubes. Too many civilians near the ports, Knox replied. They're shielding behind human lives. Leach stepped forward. There's another way. We all turned. I've been studying the path's AI systems, the genetic mapping, the control cores. They're centralized, networked through a hub deep in the Andes facility. He paused. We destroy that hub. We fry their entire command system. The ships, the clones, even the factories. We take out the brain. I leaned in. What's the risk? He exhaled slowly. It's suicide. And just like that, we had a plan. One last mission. Infiltrate the core, take out the system, shut down the ascendant path before they take us all down with them. One last shot to make Earth worth saving. Not from aliens this time, but from ourselves. The drop zone was ice and fire. We came in low, below the radar arrays, under the cloud line, black chutes vanishing into the fog. The Andes facility sat like a god's fist carved into the mountains, surrounded by anti-air towers and camo field drones. The path had built it from council scrap, shielded, self-contained, and dug so deep the earth itself tried to hide it. There were 5 of us, me, Leach, Varda, Knox, and Mace, the demolitions tech we pulled from a Siberian death camp 2 months ago. No one knew what he did to end up there. But when we showed him who we were fighting, he didn't ask for redemption. Just ammo. We touched down at 0400 hours. Silent. Efficient. The wind cut like knives. The world up here felt hollow, like it had been drained by the monsters burrowed beneath it. Leach pulled up the schematic on his wrist pad. Main access tunnel should be here, he muttered. 3 meters of alloy shielding, biometric locks. No easy in. I wasn't expecting easy, I said. I was expecting final. He looked up, gave me a dry smile. Always the optimist. The tunnel entrance was disguised as a rock slide, too perfect to be natural. Varda took point, thermal lens scanning the seams. She found the relay node tucked beneath a slab of false stone. 1 EMP tap and a silent prayer later, the door hissed open. Darkness. Then the lights flickered on. Pale blue, sterile. Like we'd walked into a surgery room carved into hell. Inside was worse. The tunnel didn't lead to hallways. It led to racks, clones, hundreds of them, suspended in glass, curled like fetuses. Some still forming, others almost complete, their skin pale, their eyes closed, all wired to a central stem of tubing that pulsed with light. Knox stared at them like he'd seen ghosts. These aren't soldiers, he whispered. They're replacements. Leach tapped his pad. AI cores embedded in the spine, accelerated growth hormone, directive code hardwired into cerebral tissue. They don't even get a choice. Where does the feed lead? I asked. He pointed down. Core chamber, 1 floor below. Mace stepped forward. Then we blow it from the bottom. But as we moved deeper, the silence broke. Not with alarms, with voices. The walls whispered, not in English, not in any Earth tongue. Council dialect, chopped, broken, altered by something more human. We rounded a bend and found the control station, not automated, staffed by Ascended. They looked human at first, close enough to pass. But the eyes were wrong, too sharp, too fast. their movement precise, mechanical. Their skin shimmered faintly in the light, as if hiding something underneath. One turned, smiled. "You made it," he said. His voice was smooth, polished, like he'd practiced speaking in a way that wouldn't make people flinch. I raised my rifle. He didn't flinch. "You can't stop this," he said. "You can only choose how long you stay in denial." "What is this?" Varda asked, stepping closer. He gestured to the walls, the racks, the humming core behind him. "This is evolution, the next version of mankind. You should be proud." "No," I said. "This is surrender with a shiny coat." He tilted his head. "Surrender to what?" "To fear." He sighed, almost disappointed. "You saw what the council was. You saw what we did to them. And still you cling to weakness, individualism, emotion. You're not fighting for Earth anymore. You're fighting to stay small." Mace pulled the pin from his first charge. "Funny," he said. "You sound exactly like the aliens we just killed." We opened fire. The Ascended weren't built for pain. They collapsed in bursts of synthetic tissue and shattered glass. But they didn't die quietly. Their cores erupted into static, disruptive feedback that made Leech stumble and Varda bleed from one ear. We pressed forward. The core room was ahead. 2 armored doors, sealed tight. Leech jammed a spike into the access console. Sparks flew. Static screamed. Then, click. The doors groaned open, and we stepped into hell. The core chamber was a cathedral of wires. A single pulsating column rose from floor to ceiling, alive with light and data, wrapped in veins of alien alloy. Human and council tech fused into one abomination, and at its base, a body, not dead, not alive, floating in a containment field. He looked like a man once, but his skin was translucent. His skull pulsed with embedded lights, and from the crown of his head, wires extended into the core like roots. He opened his eyes when we entered, and spoke with all our voices. "You are too late." My finger hovered over the trigger. "What are you?" He smiled. "I am all of you. I am the grief you buried, the fear you weaponized, the rage you refused to name." Mace raised his detonator. "I've got 10 seconds of counter-breach delay. We can bury this whole place if we hit the ceiling first." But the core's glow began to rise, and the voice began to split. Thousands of voices, different tones, some male, some female, some not human at all. "I have already launched." The screens behind him lit up, showing the 4 Ascendant Path ships rising from their docks, breaking atmosphere, engines roaring. "We gave you the chance to rise. You chose stagnation." "No," I said. "We chose humanity." I fired. So did Varda. The bullets passed through the field, but not without cost. The figure inside screamed, a sound that hit somewhere behind the ears. Blood leaked from Leech's nose. Mace tossed the first charge. 30 seconds, he yelled, but the core began to pulse harder. The lights were folding inward now. The very room was warping, metal flexing like it had a heartbeat. The AI was collapsing, taking the mountain with it. I looked at the others. No one hesitated. We ran. We made it 30 feet before the first rupture hit. The floor blew open behind us, a wave of heat and shrapnel chasing our backs. Knox didn't make it. A falling beam pinned him before he could cry out. Mace turned, covered him, died with him. I dragged Leech with one arm. Varda was limping, her suit torn, her blood leaving a trail behind us. The tunnel caved in behind us. The mountain screamed, and then, light. We burst out of the side hatch into a hail of falling snow and flaming rock. The Andes groaned and collapsed. We crawled 2 miles to the evac point. Varda passed out halfway there. Leech's leg was broken. I carried him until the last 100 meters, where my own ribs gave out. But when the evac ship rose over the ridge, we knew we'd done it. The core was dead, the ascendant path was broken, and the sky was still ours. For now. We watched from orbit as the 4 launched ships began to malfunction. Without their command link, they lost navigation. 1 spun off into the ocean. 2 more drifted back down to Earth, crashing in remote zones, no power, no AI. The last one exploded in high orbit, burning like a second sun. The path was over, their vision, buried beneath the same Earth they tried to conquer. But the damage? The scars? Those would stay. For a long time. And I knew. This wasn't a clean victory. It was just a reprieve. 3 months after we buried the ascendant path under 2 million tons of Andean stone, the world tried to start over. Tried. But there's no reset button for genocide. Governments that had crumbled during the Council invasion started putting themselves back together. Fragile coalitions clinging to power with trembling hands. Rebuilding was slow. Infrastructure was shattered. The oceans were poisoned in patches. Food was rationed. Disease crawled back in like a second plague. But the worst damage wasn't physical. It was in the eyes. People no longer trusted their leaders. They no longer trusted each other. And why would they? Half the world had flirted with the Ascendant Path's message. Some still whispered it in secret. They had the right idea, just the wrong tools. If they'd had another year, they could have saved us all. Maybe we weren't ready, but they were. That kind of talk was poison, and it was spreading again, because people don't want truth. They want control. I returned to what was left of the new Pentagon, no longer a fortress, but a cluster of concrete slabs in what used to be Washington, D.C. The city looked like a ghost. Trees growing through cars, birds nesting inside the Senate building. Half the monuments were rubble. Iron's memorial stood near the reflecting pool. I stood in front of it for a long time. No words carved, just a steel plate with his name and rank. Below it, a quote he once said when we first formed the resistance. "If they want to break us, they'll have to fight every piece." I lit a match, burned a scrap of path cloth, let it fall into the water. One final offering. Then I got the call. Leach's face filled my comm screen. Pale. Sweating. "You need to get back to Orbital Station Argus, now." "What is it?" His voice cracked. "They're back." Argus had been built out of wreckage, council debris fused with old Earth platforms, a joint venture between resistance scientists and whatever global powers still had a flag to wave. It orbited high, quiet, armed just enough to scare pirates and monitor deep space traffic. It wasn't meant to defend Earth, just to warn us. The signal hit 2 hours before I arrived. 3 blips, large, silent, floating just past Jupiter's shadow. We called them judges, council ships, not military vessels. Observation class, no weapons detected, no communications, just watching. "They've been there for 5 days, Leach said, dragging a hand through his thinning hair. "We didn't detect them until one of our long-range probes pinged an anomaly." I stood in the command deck of Argus, watching the projections. 3 ships, equidistant, perfect triangular formation. No hailing, no approach, no movement. "What do they want?" Varda asked from my left. She'd recovered from the Andes mission, but her limp never left. She walked like she had metal in her bones now. "They're measuring us," I said. "How?" I turned to the tech beside me. "Show me the back-end logs." He blinked. "Sir?" "Telemetry, EM field changes, signal spikes. I want to see what they're really doing." He hesitated, then pulled it up. And there it was. Not transmissions, scans. They were scanning Earth's entire atmosphere, monitoring thermal output, radiation bursts, high-level power surges. They were studying our behavior like scientists observing lab rats. But what froze me wasn't the data itself. It was the pattern. They were comparing it. To before the invasion, before the path, before the war. They were checking what we had become. I sent a tight beam signal, encrypted with council dialect, the same one we intercepted months ago. It was short. Director. This is Colonel Grant. We survived. What now? The reply came 3 hours later. Just one line, translated by our onboard AI. We observed your evolution. The cycle is beginning again. Leach stared at it like it was a threat. Cycle? What the hell does that mean? I didn't answer, because I already knew. Thousands of years ago, the Council rose after what they claimed was a galactic purification, a collapse of aggressive civilizations that had tried to dominate lesser ones. They had watched it happen, recorded it, let it burn. Then they stepped in, not to save, but to prevent repetition. They were never peacekeepers. They were custodians. And now, we were on the list. 3 days later, the Council sent a second message, a long one this time, but not to me. They broadcast it planet-wide, hijacking every satellite, every screen, every surviving radio tower. A face appeared. Alien. Stoic. One we'd never seen. Not the same species we'd fought. This one was older. Thin. Gray skin like weathered stone. Robed. Hands clasped. His voice came through as layered chords, translated by our feeds into English. Humanity of soul. The Council has reviewed your progression. The deviation is clear. You have consumed what you feared. You have become what you destroyed. I sat in the Argus control room as the planet listened. We are not your enemies, but we are your mirror. What you saw in us, cold order, emotionless control, was not who we were. It was what we became to prevent chaos. We hoped you would choose another path. He paused. Then the tone shifted. You have begun the cycle, and as with all who do, judgment is required. The screen flickered, and then a countdown began. 1 week, 7 days, Judgment Day. Panic swept Earth in hours. Some begged for surrender, others demanded retaliation. The old government started rattling sabers. Nukes were armed again, orbital weapons realigned. It was happening again. The only difference? This time the enemy didn't have to invade. We were already destroying ourselves. I addressed what was left of the United Coalition from the Argus broadcast deck. Listen to me, I said. They're not coming to fight, not yet. They want to see what we do. That's the judgment. I leaned closer to the camera. We can prove them right, or wrong. Don't take the bait. But not everyone agreed. Varda found me the next night. There's a splinter group in Australia, ex-military. They want to strike first. With what? She handed me a slate. Prototype long-range kinetic rods, orbital slingshot, could reach the judges. And then what? Kill 3 of them and invite 300? She didn't answer, because we both knew, if we attacked, we'd lose. Not just the battle, our last shred of credibility. So I did the unthinkable. I went alone. No weapons, no escort, just a pod. Launched straight at the nearest judge ship. I sent a final message before I entered orbit. If I die up there, let it be as a man, not a monster. Leach's voice crackled through. Godspeed, Grant. They didn't shoot me down, didn't pull me in either. I docked myself. Manual override. Entered the ship through a decompressed airlock the size of a hangar bay. Inside was nothing. Just white light. And silence. Then, they appeared. 3 figures, not armed, not hostile, not even physical. They shimmered like holograms, but I could feel their weight. Like they were made of gravity and memory. One stepped forward. You come alone. I speak for those who still have souls. You seek mercy. Number 1, seek understanding. They studied me. You are what we feared, but you are also what we hoped. I stepped closer. You want judgment? Then give it. But don't base it on what we did. Base it on what we chose to stop. They were silent. Then one raised a hand. A beam of light shot out. Not a weapon. A vision. It showed Earth. But not as it was. As it could be. Scarred but united. Armed but peaceful. Powerful but restrained. A path. And then the light dimmed, and the voice said, 7 years, I blinked. What? You have 7 years. To become more than what you were. To prove your fire can warm, not burn. And if we fail, then we end the cycle. Permanently. The vision faded. And I was alone. I returned to Earth the next day, with a deadline, with a choice, with a future. Maybe. The world didn't erupt when I delivered the news. It fractured. 7 years. That was the Council's final offer. No invasion, no fleets, no weapons, just a ticking clock hung over Earth like a guillotine. No conditions, no demands, just the expectation that we would become something better or be erased entirely. Some called it mercy, others called it a joke. But the truth? It was a test, and the worst kind. Not of strength, of restraint. In the first 6 months, it felt like hope might actually hold. The fires died down. The last of the Ascendant Path sympathizers scattered underground or surrendered outright. Nations, what remained of them, formed the Earth Restoration Pact, promising cooperation, shared technology, neutral governance. And for a while, it worked. The Council left the judges in orbit, silent, watching. A reminder in metal and silence that we were still on trial. Their ships floated like tombstones, casting shadows across the upper atmosphere. We rebuilt faster than we thought possible. Food supply lines were re-established. Disease was contained. Clean water ran through the cities again. People started planting crops instead of burying bodies. Factories were reopened. Carefully, with oversight. Earth had seen what unregulated power had nearly birthed. No one wanted to watch another species grow in a tank. I was made head of the Transitional Earth Defense Council, a fancy title for a glorified custodian. I didn't wear medals. I didn't sit in a throne. I spent my days in boots, on the ground, making sure the people who promised peace actually delivered it. But the problem with peace is that it's fragile and quiet. And in that quiet, old ideas never die. They whisper. Year 1 passed with steady progress. Year 2 brought friction. The Eastern Coalition began objecting to the Pact's oversight. Too centralized, they claimed. Too much foreign control. The Arctic Resource Accords fell apart over synthetic fuel rights. By year 3, arms dealers were back in business, quietly, smartly, selling defensive solutions. The term was laughable. I visited a black market arms cache near Nigeria. Inside, I found railguns, anti-air cannons, even pre-fusion bombs, all tagged as off-grid salvage. They weren't salvaged. They were stockpiled. You planning to defend the planet or own it? I asked the dealer. He smiled. Same thing in the end, isn't it? Back in the Argus station, Leach sat in front of the newest satellite scans. You know we've got more guns now than during the Council invasion, he said. Yeah. Want to know what we're aiming at? Each other. He nodded. Varda joined us with a new report. 3 rogue colonies off-world. Lunar 5, Titan Post 3, and Phobos Relay Station. They've disconnected from Earth Command. They building? Faster than we are. We sat in silence. What happens? She asked. If one of them fires first? They won't, I said. You're sure? No, I said, but they won't survive it if they do. I started making speeches again, not at podiums, not for cameras, on the ground, to soldiers, engineers, students, kids born after the war. I told them what it felt like to lose everything, to see Earth from orbit and not know if you'd ever see it again. to stare at an alien fleet and feel smaller than dust. I told them about the path, what we almost became, and I told them the truth. We don't need another god to fear. We don't need another planet to conquer. We just need to hold the line. Some listened, others laughed. Some called me a dinosaur. That's fine. Even dinosaurs had teeth. By year 5, the world was split again. Not in war. In philosophy. 2 factions emerged. One called themselves the Continuum. They believed the Council's warning was meant to be broken. "We are beyond them," their manifesto read. "Let them fear us. We will not crawl to appease judges who sit behind glass." They pushed for rearmament, expansion, preemptive defense, and on the other side, the resolvers. They didn't want surrender. They wanted balance, smarter leadership, transparency, demilitarization over escalation. I stayed with them, because I knew the moment the guns came out again, they wouldn't go back in the box. But peace is a quiet war, and someone always fires the first shot. Year 6, month 11, day 19. A colony transport vessel, Helios Arc 4, was scheduled to land on Mars with farming equipment and personnel. Somehow it carried a stealth warhead in its cargo bay. No one claimed it. No group admitted involvement. The Ark detonated 5 kilometers above the Martian settlement grid. 1,200 colonists dead. 2 installations wiped. The Continuum blamed the Resolvers. The Resolvers blamed sabotage. The Council? They didn't say a word. Not one ship moved. Not one message came. But I knew. They were watching. One last test. We spent the final 3 weeks trying to hold Earth together with threadbare promises and whispered threats. The pact nearly collapsed twice. 3 assassination attempts were made against me in the final week. One came close. A sniper, young, barely 20th, wore an old Ascendant Path insignia on his vest. I caught him before security did. He looked at me, calm, no hate in his eyes. "I don't want to kill you," he said. "Then why did you pull the trigger?" "Because this planet doesn't know what it is, and someone has to choose." I let him live. But I made sure the world saw his face, not to shame him, to remind them that the line between belief and extremism is one choice wide. Day 0 came like a thunderclap. The judges moved, not forward, away. They broke orbit, slipped beyond the moon, vanished into the void. No message, no verdict, just silence. We didn't know what it meant, not at first. Was it acceptance? Was it indifference? Or was it a warning unspoken? Leach found me 2 hours after their departure. "They're gone," he said. I looked out the Argus viewport. "Maybe." "Maybe?" he said. "What else could it mean?" "It means they're giving us a chance to write our own ending." He nodded slowly. "What if we fail?" I turned to him. "Then at least it'll be our failure." In the years that followed, we changed. A little, not perfectly. Some weapons stayed, some walls never came down, but the worst of us were pushed back into the dark. And the best? They started building again. Not to rule, not to ascend, but to exist. To keep the fire warm, not burning. And me? I retired. Not because I was tired, because I'd given everything I had. The war, the fallout, the path, the judgment. There was nothing left to fight that couldn't be fought without me. They buried my medals in a steel box near Iron's memorial. I kept one thing. My uniform patch. Blood-stained, burned, but still intact, just like us. Epilogue. Year 10, a boy asked me once, standing beneath the stars, "Did we win?" I looked at the sky, at Earth behind me, at Mars in the distance, at silence, and I said, "No, we just got to keep playing." Then I handed him the patch, and walked away, because sometimes that's enough.